stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mrs. Brown. Mr. Camella. Mrs. Code. Ms. Heffron. Mr. Helpin. Mr. Suziani did notify me he would not be here today. Mrs. Viscusi.
Here.
Mr. Viscusi. Here. Mrs. Washington.
Here.
Mayor Dasher.
Here.
Solicitor Kunis. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Our meeting is presently videotaped and it will be on the Bellevue Borough website within 48 hours. So if you can check back, we would appreciate that. Also, we're going to have an executive session prior to the end of the meeting for personnel matters. Public contribution. Are there any visitors who wish to speak? If you can come up to the podium, state your name and address, and write it on the register. You will have 5 minutes now, and you will have 2 minutes towards the end of the meeting.
Tom Cody, 600 Maryland. I actually have with me something for council. I just want to give one of these to pass around. What you have here is a copy of Allegheny County's rules for their off-leash dog parks. And I know this has been brought up a number of times, and I think it needs to be reiterated because this past week I had business where I had to go up through the park and visit their dog park while I was in the area and saw a myriad of families with kids and stuff like that, having a good time. And whereas I don't have a dog right now, I'll just put that up front. I'm sure someone's going to research that. I do not have a dog right now. My 7-month-old daughter absolutely loves playing with my parents' dogs, and there's just a joy to her, and obviously keep her close and keep things under control. But I just would hate the idea that if my grandparents had their
Just wait to your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
I apologize. Sorry, technical difficulties.
No, I don't know what that is. I just wanted to say basically, I'll make it short, that if my parents were to take my daughter out for a visit for a dog park, they would have to go to my park or Riverview Park, which also allows children under supervision of adults. I think we're pushing families away. I think the dog park is an amazing asset that we can be taking advantage of, and I applaud the work that went into it. I just really think that we should take full advantage of it by allowing at least supervision of children at a certain age. I don't know what level you want to make that, but I mean, if you would bar infants, that makes sense. But to say that someone who's 12 years old and can handle walking a dog or can even walk their own family pet down the street is not allowed dog park. Seems foolish to me. The second thing I want to bring up is I just wanted to ask, and you can answer this when I'm done, real quick, is who is the official determiner for the vacant storefront ordinance? Who is the one who determines the good faith effort portion of whether or not they're trying to rent the property? Because it seems to me that's subjective, and I'm one who likes to make sure that the same rules are being applied to everyone. So if say, ma'am, you are making the rules at this point, if a year from now you're no longer president of council, or who at that point would be determining, what is a good faith effort for renting a property? Is that the code enforcer or?
I believe, okay, first of all, it's code enforcement.
Okay.
Okay, but I believe in here, wait a minute, that it has a good faith effort, okay, and good faith efforts include contracts with pre-orders, newspaper ads, window signs, or other methods provided that the effort is actually likely to generate interest in the property and the owner is actually willing to rent, sell, or lease. So it's basically stating that, you would have a realtor sign a contract and they would try to rent it, or you're putting an ad, you're putting putting something in Craigslist.
Right.
I mean, when I rent my properties, that's exactly what I do.
Okay.
So I think that's a good faith effort.
Okay.
One of the things that I proposed is to have, in addition to that, and of course it has to come to council, that if, under the waiver of fees, what was the sentence we discussed?
Under good cause as determined by a vote of the majority of council.
Okay, so now you've got 9 people, and someone states, okay, well, I'm trying to renovate the property. Because of the renovation, it's going to take 6 months, it's going to take 9 months. This is the schedule I'm going to use. So then you've got 9 people, and that's proposed. I don't know if that will happen. But then you've got 9 people to state, okay, I can understand. I mean, and it's hard to get 9 people to agree. So if 9 people agree that that person is making a good faith effort, then I think the person is making a good faith effort. Now, that is something I proposed when, I was reading, so that may be something that they, that we all agree upon.
Yeah.
We'll do that in the discussion phase.
Yeah, and for the record, if you don't mind me saying, I support the idea of this ordinance. I know other communities have it. I think the spirit behind it is there. It makes me nervous when I hear subjective language, like when I hear good faith effort. And I see there's some delineation of what that looks like. Right, but again, if a code enforcer says that, just an ad on Craigslist isn't good enough, you have to hire a contractor. I mean, or a realtor, a contractor, realtor. Like, it just seems to me like there's back and forth. You do the gray.
Well, then that person would be able to come to council. So there is, if we agree to this, that person would be able to come to council and say, wait a minute here, I am making a good faith effort, and this is what I'm doing. So I would hope that council would, consider that. But that is one, I can see where you're coming from with that. But if not, I mean, my goodness, I think anybody, if they have a problem with any of our ordinances, if they come to council, we would be willing to look at that. But I think good faith effort. If you're trying to rent your property, you're either going through a realtor, you're doing an ad, you're doing a window sign, okay? You're putting it on the internet. I mean, to me, that's showing an effort.
Okay, I just want to.
Is that the only thing?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. The other thing I was confused about it all was the window decoration thing. I mean, like, it seemed to me like you were just forcing people to I don't know, to what level you force to decorate the windows, and like what is nice versus what is unattractive to the determining body. That seemed also really great to me. But again, the spirit of it is, I think, spot on. I think there's some property we can all agree need to be moved at some level, should be being used and utilized. I just was concerned about that subjectivity of it.
I mean, I've never known our code enforcement officer to be that unreasonable. If he is, I'm sure the resident would be coming up and complaining to his immediate supervisor, which would then come to us. But what we're trying to do is not have black plastic bags, paper, one example is Classic Chevrolet to their empty storefront. They have paintings in there, and I think that looks so nice.
Yeah.
So, someone could do any kind of decoration. You can do an all-season type decoration, put in a nice, plant.
Just something I would put out there that it seems to me. No, yeah, just the other thing, the dog park thing. I think we should reconsider that. I just think that's an asset we could use better. So I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other visitors who wish to speak? Any other visitors who wish to speak? Thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate it. And prior meeting minutes. We don't have any meeting minutes to approve.
I believe all we had was the June 11th, which I caught up on from the prior.
Okay. Well, did we didn't vote on that, right?
We did not vote on that at the pre-council meeting, but it is in the pre-council package.
Okay. If we can have the meeting minutes, or at least, we can. Okay. Do we have a motion to pass the meeting minutes for June 11th, 2013?
Motion to pass the meeting minutes for June 11th.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve the meeting minutes from June 11th, 2013. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Do we have a motion to approve the payment of the September bills?
Motion to pay September bills.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to pay the September bills. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bromley. Mr. Camello. For the record, Mrs. Coder is here. Mrs. Coder.
Aye.
Ms. Heffley. Also for the record, Mr. Helpling is here. Mr. Helpling. Aye. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washington.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Reports. Mayor.
I apologize, I had some technical difficulties, I was unable to turn off the mayor's report, so whatever is online, we have to suffice until we can get that in everybody's hands.
Okay.
That is definitely my oversight.
Do you have it? Can you verbally give us?
I do not, I would be remiss to think I could quote those numbers by memory.
Okay.
But I do have one thing I would like to do during my report, if I may welcome in front of the council or in front of the audience. It was a proclamation from me to Mr. Paul Cusick. If you'd please come up, please. A proclamation of Mayor of the Borough of Bellevue for recognizing Paul Cusick for his heroic actions on May 24, 2013 at the Citizens Bank in Bellevue, Pennsylvania. Whereas Mr. Cusick's outstanding attentiveness and quick response in recognizing the signs of a serious health issue and prompt actions in administering CPR saved the life of a local bank patron and fellow Bellevue resident. Whereas the patron was revived due to Paul's action and required no additional life-saving treatment despite the fact that she was not breathing and had no pulse when her initial checked her vital signs. Therefore, be it proclaimed that I hereby send my sincere thanks and gratitude to Paul Cusick for quick thinking, maintaining his composure, and for his timely actions without hesitation to help someone in their time of need. Mr. Cusick, thank you very much.
Thank you, and good work. Appreciate that. Any questions for the mayor? No questions? Thank you, George, appreciate it. Treasurer, Paul Cusick. The infamous Paul Cusick.
First, thank you, Mayor. That was unexpected. Very much appreciated. You have in the packet the cash flow comparison sheets. At this point, we have $992,217.10. In the general fund, that's the cash balance. So far, we're doing fine. We're right on schedule. The DAS, myself, and Moss are still going over the projections for the end of the year. We are meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We will finish that up and we will inform the mayor and council of our determinations. But right now, we don't feel there's any problem that we foresee. The other page is the what's in all the accounts. Everything is as it has been. One thing is we do not receive interest on our stuff in the banks because they also forego all the fees. So we don't pay any fees. Right now, the interest is a lot less than the fees.
You're talking about the checking accounts.
That's all the checking accounts and savings accounts. So, and most of the savings accounts. We made an agreement with the bank that they will charge. The only one that we do get interest on is a little bit of interest for the liquid fuels account because that is required by state law. But we have to have it has to be an interest-bearing account. Everything else, we only charge for bonus checks and things like that. So we are way ahead on this. If the interest rates ever start really climbing, we'll be negotiating. At this time, we're doing fine. We're making that very well. Otherwise, I have no other items. If anybody has any questions.
Savings account, what fees would we have on a savings account?
Well, we don't have the savings account.
Okay, you said the checking and savings accounts.
I on that, check. The only, we do have, what I was referring to is we do have an account in Northwest Bank that is, we put money in there because we had too much money in our accounts at one time before we found out that they were covered.
Too much money for the FDIC insurance.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
the thing is, with the governments, we don't really come under that, we are protected.
Okay.
So we have put this over there in anticipating having too much money. We have 17,000 sitting in Northwest Savings, as you see on your list. And they do provide, that's kind of the savings, it's a checking account, it's kind of.
Well, we get interest on that account.
Yeah, we get 70-some cents a month for $17,000.
Right,
It's not worth much. Okay, so I'm just saying, there was an exception, and that's why I threw that call out. Otherwise, any questions?
Any questions for our treasurer, Paul? Any questions? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Engineer?
Thank you. A couple things to carry over from the council meeting. We have discussed awarding the housing demolition project to Continental Demolition of Bellevue Park in the amount of $24,000. I'm not sure whether we want to take the motion under my report or we want to wait till old business to do it. I guess any time is better than no time.
Do we have a motion to award the housing demolition to the Continental and Demolition of Bethel Park?
Second.
Second? Who seconded? Jim?
Yes.
A motion has been made and seconded to award the CD 393.11.4 housing demolition project bid to Continental and Demolition of Bethel Park, PA, in the amount of $24,000 to come out of the Capital Improvements Fund, budget line item 330.413.375. Discussion on the motion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Browning. Mr. Camello.
Aye.
Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Hellman. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washburn. Motion carries.
And everybody knows the houses that are involved in this, because we've received them in the past, everybody knows.
Now, that paperwork will go into the column and we'll start the process of getting the contractor on board. And so that house or those houses will probably be addressed before the end of the year.
So 3 of them should be demolished before the end of the year,
That's
or?
correct.
Okay.
The second item are 2 change orders for the skate plaza phase 2 work. One in the amount of $2,592.10. And one in the recommended amount of $7,475.88. Change order number 1, now these were submitted way back in January, and then we were back and forth with Spawn Ranch on what exactly the contractor did to, say, deserve change order. Change order 1 was for regrading of the base material at the phase 2 of the skate plaza. They finished up the work and requested additional payment for that, and we recommended that that be done. The second change order was for a remobilization and moving the concrete elements twice because of the fact that the borough's coordination didn't coincide with the delivery, and the delivery came, and they had to go back and get a crane a second time to move the offloaded concrete components twice. Now, they had originally requested $11,000. We asked them to take a look at that again in May. They came back in July and said, okay, it's $10,000. And our recommendation is not to pay them for the labor costs that they incurred, but to pay them for the material and for the rental of the cranes to place those concrete components.
What will happen if we're not paying for the labor? Are there any
I don't know,
ramifications?
but I'm pretty sure that they'll accept whatever we
Okay.
allocate.
Okay, do we have a motion for the, Yeah, we'll do discussion that one. Do we have a motion for the change order number one?
Motion to change order number one.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve change order number one, request and recommendation for CD 38-4-3 for Bain Park Project Phase 2 in the amount of $2,592.10. Discussion on the motion. Mark?
On that, you're saying that's reasonable?
Yes.
What they did, I have to think
Yes. Again, this was submitted in January. We were holding on to it until they submitted all their changes that they were going to request for anything else that they did under phase 2. And then change order 2 followed from that. So, yes, and again, to elaborate just a little bit more, the borough had a portion of work that they needed to do, the contractor had a portion of work that they needed to do. When they came in to set the grade, and I checked the grade, and we were spot on with what needed to be done. When they came in to dig the foundations, they found that they needed to do extra work. So they spent an extra week and a half to get it ready. So I think it's a reasonable request, for a reasonable amount.
Any other questions? No other questions? All those in favor say aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bromley. Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coder.
Aye.
Ms. Heflin. Mr. Helmling.
Aye.
Mrs. Viscusi.
Aye.
Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washburn.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve change order number two?
Make a motion to approve change order number two.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to approve change order number two in the amount of $7,475.88. Any questions?
Do you have an idea of the size of what days and rental rates for?
Right, the VAS has the itemized rental rate. I did not bring that with me. I think that the two cranes total were around $5,000.
If I may, the 90T and 30T crane rentals, $5,329.90. And trucking, I guess that's freight that it is around, so $5,329.90 is the crane rental.
Is it,
Two cranes.
sorry to be picking this apart, but I have to. Is that their charge to us for the crane, or would they actually pay for the crane? In other words, is that the markup on a crane? Can you do that? In other words, they went to a local rental company and rented that, and it
Yes.
was $2,000, and they can us for $3,000 more.
Well, I didn't ask that question, but
May I interject? The quote or the detail after all the cost items has a line that says 20% for additional insurance, profit, and overhead. So based on what I see in the document, it tells me that this is their cost and they added the profit number as part of this.
now the contract that was written with, again, the COG being the owner of the work and the borough being the beneficiary and contributor of the local match, requires that a certain procedure be followed for change orders, meaning itemized cost plus an allowable percentage for overhead profit in the organization. So all those items were taken into account. So whether it's an agreeable amount, it's certainly reasonable under the contract, and that's what it was going to be.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bromley.
Aye.
Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coder.
Aye.
Ms. Heflin. Mr. Helmling. Mrs. Viscusi.
Aye.
Mr. Viscusi.
Aye.
Mrs. Washburn.
Aye.
Motion carries.
With that, that will wrap up the phase 2 construction. And with respect to what we had initially years back that's estimated what the phase 2 cost, with respect to this change orders, we're $10,000 over what the estimated budget cost was. So $100,000 was the big amount. It's going to finish being about $110,000. So that's not including the bonus time as to match. That was taken care of under the contract, and that's getting resolved with the COG. So this is just wrapping up all those loose ends with respect to small ranch.
And when will we start on phase 3?
I'm
Which
glad-
is,
I'm glad
I think
you asked
that's
that
the
question.
bathrooms and the
Well,
parking.
I think at the last committee meeting, I distributed a layout of the expectation of what phase 3 was going to be. It showed some adjustments to the parking lot down below the library, the rain gardens around the skate plaza, and then some other things. I would like council to take a look at that, get some feedback to me, because we have to go to the DCNR and request a change of scope before we move any further. So once we're all on board with whatever changes you want, we have $60,000 in the grant and $60,000 there in Borough Match, which has already been budgeted.
Okay.
We can move forward with it, but we need to request from them a scope change that they have to approve. We did not anticipate phase 2 being paid under the CDBG funding. We anticipated phase 2 being local match and the DCNR grant. If you recall, way back when we started this process, nobody knew whether or not we were going to get any money. Then everybody said, okay, yeah, we're going to get a lot of money. Well, you see how much we've gotten over the years, and it's a good amount, but we're still not done with that first effort of requesting grant funding for the skate plaza itself. So, if you can take a look at that sketch, give me your ideas. I think at the committee meetings this month, we'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And I would expect before the end of October, we can probably finalize those changes, get the scope change requesting the DCNR, and move ahead. We've got until the end of 2015 to do the rest of the work. Sorry.
I'm choking over the cost, I think.
We've got until the end of 2015 to spend all the money with the DCNR. And with that, I believe that's all I have.
Any questions for Mark?
Yeah, I know the first time I asked this question, I don't know who asked this question, so I'm just going to ask. You know how we all get those government magazines and Borough and industry meetings? How can we get this project in that magazine? I don't expect you to know that.
We call the editor or the PR person, whoever the public relations person is, and we say, we've got a project, could you take a look at this? Here's what we'd like to do, can you get it?
So our office will just do that?
I think so. I think it's a matter of, PSAB, the State Association of Boroughs, call them, and certainly.
That would be cool. I mean,
Any other questions for John? No other questions. Thank you, appreciate it. Next is library, hiring and pay. Did we do that at Greenhouse?
We did not officially pass the motion. We can have that on the agenda a little later in the meeting. We deferred it to this meeting.
Oh, I see it. Okay, thank you. Okay, and our librarians are here. Administration, Ron?
Thank you. Yes, I have a report. Working on the tree vitalize grant for September, I have given our solicitor a draft copy of what I believe to be a pretty good tree ordinance that is a requirement of that application. I'll talk a little bit more about that under, I believe it's under the new business section I have scheduled. I'll go a little more detail at that point. Also, in line with, had a meeting with John and Victor Paving. Our paving project will start on September 17th. They will start at Bellevue Park, which will have very little impact on traffic. That's kind of handy because while they're doing that, their supervisor will be riding around with Mike and making sure that all the specifics of the streets that we have covered are covered. We believe it to take about 2 weeks for the entire paving, which maybe John can help me with the streets because again, I wasn't here during the bidding. But they're ready to go. They originally told us the 22nd, but I received an email today saying they moved it up to the 17th, so we should see it's not getting done very quickly. Third item, I have submitted a letter of intent for technical assistance to the Governor's Center. We expect approval on that within the next 10 days. At that point, there will be a meeting of the department head, President Washington, and myself to specify our request and make it custom to Bellevue. Item 4 is budget work, which Paul mentioned. We have completed our projections for the general fund. We are working on all the other funds tomorrow. I have met with all the department heads as well as the mayor to discuss budgets and submission of information from me. That's on schedule to get something to the mayor third week-ish of September, so we can try to get a little jump on the budget process. When these projections are finished with all the funds, I'll be very happy to share them with council because I think it's valuable financial information. That completes my report.
Okay, any questions for our DAS? No questions? Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
And, okay, library, we'll do that later. Council, do we have a motion to ratify the vote to authorize additional services for Bellevue streetscape design in the amount of $8,790 by CPC? Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to ratify the vote to authorize additional services for Bellevue streetscape design, except for the bump out at Lincoln and Star. Changing the amount of the, that we would be voting.
Do we have a second? Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to ratify the vote to authorize the additional services for Bellevue streetscape design in the amount of $8,790 by CEC Incorporated, excluding the bump out at Lincoln and Star. Discussion on the motion. Mark?
So what's the purpose? What does this mean? Are you saying you don't want, you're trying to eliminate bump outs or just paying for the extra?
We haven't really even discussed North Star bump out. It's not even discussed, it shows up on the plan. I didn't get to see that. I found out about it last week. I'm like, are you kidding me? And it's extra money?
What are the four bump outs we included?
They are at South Star and Lincoln, and I think North Star and Lincoln. Am I correct on that? No? Not South Star, South Jackson and Lincoln and North Jackson and Lincoln.
It's Jackson and Lincoln.
That's two.
No, that's two, one on each side, each one is four.
One on each side of each one? Okay.
And now we're accepting the CPC as the company to do the rest of the work with a star on it.
Any other discussion?
Well, sorry.
I'm sorry.
So did we, I didn't get a chance, I wish I would have got a chance to talk with Brett. So did we hear anything explaining this, or did we hear from Brett?
Well, we cannot have a bump on Lincoln and Star because that is a state road. So we can't do it even if we wanted to do it. There are, and that was never ever discussed.
So if we, let me ask you this, let me get this right. 'Cause I don't want to mess around with bump outs anymore if I can get it done. And so is this, just let me read this real quick. So why do we not so my question would be, do we have to pay more for the Jackson Avenue, which we already have calculated in there? If, in other words, if this gets deleted, is you're deleting the Jackson, is Jackson Avenue costing us anything extra, or is that going to stay in there the way it is? In other words, is this extra cost just related to Star Avenue?
Jane, you have something to say?
Well, Sue's motion was just to eliminate star and bump out, so I don't know what the calculation is.
So we would still be,
Being, but
we would still
when this came back in April and changed the council's original vote with all the bump outs gone, in April we came back and said, okay, let's negotiate 4 bump outs so that people can see them. That's what it's supposed to say.
Okay.
Not star, we can talk about star and
So
that's what, well, they said do that.
I'm almost done. So again, if you eliminate any fees to do Star, is North Jackson, I can only ask Brad, is North Jackson still included in the original?
Right.
Is there no additional fee for North Jackson? It's already, I'm on the problem.
Okay, so this is going back to the original meeting. Basically what was discussed was to only put a bump out, which if you call a sidewalk through it, and that equals 2, whatever you want to call it, but that's one bump out on the south side of Lincoln Avenue. The other one was actually up on the north side of Star. That's been in there from the very beginning that everyone voted for. I did not recommend that. I talked to John about that. I talked to Ron about that as well, where a bump outs only function when they're across the street from each other typically, for the most part. I would not recommend putting one bump out on one side of the street and not one on the other side, because you're not getting the full benefit out of it. So in the change order that was in there, it is basically to do both sides of Lincoln Avenue at Jackson. That was included in there. The North Star, which there's really not a whole lot there. If you wanted to put a bump out there, it's a curb. There's not a whole lot of money there. The effort is going to be in Jackson because there's inlets and things we need to deal with. So there's really not a whole lot to do. So to take the one off of Star, that's not really going to save a whole lot of money on design. And you can absolutely put a bump out at a state route. However, you do have to get an HOP, which is an additional fee down the road. So I would definitely not recommend doing that one, at least now, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't design one and have one ready for the future, and then it just goes through the permitting process if you wanted to go through with that, actually that one at the Star and Lincoln intersection. So you can still get both bump outs on both sides of the street at Lincoln Avenue for what's in that change order.
Because those weren't included in the original package. In other words, why the extra fee instead of definition?
Okay, so the extra fee came in when we initially did the design. All the bump outs were removed. So we redid all the intersections to, instead of having the ramp, the ADA ramp, go through the bump out, which is, essentially just a ramped sidewalk, which is a lot cheaper and easier to deal with. That's the idea that was there. When the bump outs were eliminated, we have to put all those ADA ramps back into all the curves, all the edges. So there's a lot of design that had to be redone to incorporate all those. And final design was not done on the bump outs, I would say that to begin with. So when the bump outs were eliminated, we did final design based on using the curves, and all the ramps are inside on the curves and in the sidewalk. Then it was determined after the drawings were done that we wanted to add bump outs into it. So that's why there's a change order to add the bump outs after the design has already been done. So that's where you come up with the change order on why we need to have additional design money to actually design the bump outs.
So, I understand. So part of this does fall back on the fact that we had a committee that recommended one thing and got pushed away, and got brought back, and you went back and forth. So I understand that everybody needs to understand that happened too. Go ahead. Okay, I understand. I'm waiting for everyone else.
Lynn, you want to comment? Well, I was just going to ask a question, but I think you almost clarified it. The four original bump outs, maybe it's me, I don't remember us talking about South Star. I remember South and North Jackson. So I know you probably just explained this, but.
It was the kind of the North Star side. The South Star side, with the radius with the trucks, you can't really put a bump out on that side.
So it's 3 bump outs, really?
Well, no, initially it was actually 2 bump outs. One was on one side of Lincoln Avenue in front of the Pizza Belmonte. The other one was up on Star. There's none recommended for on the north side, at least from what the council approved to move forward through. So I wouldn't recommend that. So I would do one on both sides. That's what I said we can do, and they're basically going to kind of be very similar in design on those sides. And then we added the one on North Star as well.
So you're recommending South Jackson, North Jackson?
Yes.
And you're saying the North Star, that's not something we could do right now, but we could set up design plans?
Yeah, I mean, you could show it on the plan, and it's just like any of these things. When we have the plan right now, we can't afford to do it all. So when we go out the bid, we're going to do as much as we can. We're going to have a couple of bid alternates to try to add a few things in, and then when we get the next funding, it just keeps going. So if you get to the end of this and say, I really want one over there, then you can get the HOP and you can install one over there.
And if we don't do the design for the North Star now, does that realize it's a savings? Not really.
Like I said, I mean, all it is a curb and there's very little there. The other one where there's money is there's an inlet, two inlets that we have to address and make sure that, you know, so that's where the money in the design is, you know, putting a curb with some, you know, soil or concrete or something, that's very minimal. So the reduction in cost would be very minimal.
So would you feel comfortable, just as a personal opinion, if we just went with North and South Jackson as bump outs at this point?
That would be fine with me.
Just as a thank you.
Let me get, I will have a question for you for the future, going down the road. With each set of bump outs, because of the final plan, is each set of bump outs going to cost us extra money?
If they're not in the design now, then, yeah, I mean, as we go through and we do the final drawings, and, yeah, then they would cost, I mean, I can't do things for free, so.
Okay, so each set of bump outs is going to, approximately how much would that cost us? For each
It all depends on each one. Like I said, if it was just North Star and there's no inlet or anything like that would cause a problem, then it's going to be very minimal. And I mean, I don't know exactly how much that would cost. It would have to be determined on the size, you know, what's going through it. The other thing, it all depends on when you do it. If we install an ADA ramp in the sidewalk and then you want to put a bump out in later, it doesn't really make sense that way too. So there's a lot of things that go into that. I think as we get more grant money and as we go, we can determine at that point that, hey, we want to add this in or not. And at that point, if I'm redoing design drawings for bidding, it's not going to cost that much to add some of these in. So are they all going to cost $1,900? Absolutely not. It's just anything where there's an inlet that there's a lot more detail that goes into that.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
So right now, you're voting to change this, to make it clear.
Right. To take the one on Lincoln and Star out.
Well, no, you're deleting this fee also.
No, we're not deleting the fee.
Oh.
No,
So you're agreeing to, you're not, okay.
The motion, James,
The motion is to accept CEC as to move on with the project, but to move on with the project without the bump out on Star Avenue.
Okay. But
So
you're
they'll
not,
still have a job.
okay, so you're not deleting that 19 truck.
no,
Okay.
not in this moment.
We can't delete the charge now.
Right, okay, I'm just making sure you are, that's all.
There's a charge for the Lincoln Star that was in the,
Yeah.
in there, that would help.
Okay, I was just double checking. That's it.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brumman. Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Haldwin. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washington.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Code enforcement, he gave his report at our pre-council meeting. Committee chair reports. Finance, our chair of finance,
The budget is being worked on as we speak.
okay. Any questions for our chair of finance, Sue? No? Okay, thank you, Sue. Parks and Recreation, Jim Sisiani is absent. Kathy, could you, is there anything from Parks and Recreation you want to add?
I'm happy Ross Township, I'm going to get these and I'm just looking at link. Their magazine where they're advertising our day on October 5th, it's on page 34. And we had a meeting with Ross Township and we are talking to them about collaborating on the pool. And there's a possibility that they may want to work with us in the future on
I'm sorry, Kathy.
No, I just said that we had a meeting with Ross Township, their Parks and Rec, and their manager, and they might be wanting to work with us because their residents really liked the resident rate, and they may want to contribute review. So we're just in the phase of talking with them about that and collaborating because the park is in Ross Township, but we own it. So it's a good intergovernmental cooperation. Nice, feel good thing to do.
Any questions for Kathy in Parks and Rec? If not, thank you so much. Public Works? Jim was speaking? Jim? If nothing, any questions for Public Works for Jim? If not, thank you. Public Safety Chair, Jane Ronald? If nothing in report, any questions or comments for Jane? If nothing, thank you, Jane. Special Committee Report, Intergovernmental Committee, on August 26th, Lynn Heffley and I attended this particular committee meeting. And what we did, we talked about investigating a mutual agreement to work together to deal with the tax sale of properties and to open up communication concerning common interests so that if there is some sort of concern, we have contact information and we will discuss it via email, text messages, and so forth. And is there anything that you would want to add to that?
Just, that we met with 2 Avalon officials and 2 people from the North Main School Group.
Right. There were 6 of us, 2 from Avalon, 2 from Bellevue, and 2 from the school district are on that committee. And that was our first meeting, and I see this as a first step, very positive. It was a good meeting. Any questions or concerns? If there is anything that you would want us to talk about, feel free to either talk to Lynn Rye, and we'll pass them on. Any other questions or comments? Resolutions. Do we have a motion for the first resolution?
Second motion to approve resolution 2013, increase tickets for library.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve resolution 2013 authorizing hiring of Teresa Timmons for a library page. Discussion on the motion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bronick. Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coe. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Helbling. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washington.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next motion, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve resolution 2113, refunds on real estate.
Do we have a second? Second. A motion has been made and seconded to approve resolution 2113 authorizing refunds of real estate taxes due to changes in assessed values or overpayments. Discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bronick. Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Helbling. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washington. Motion carries.
Do we have a motion for the next resolution?
Recommend motion of resolution 2213, extending Public Works Department summer help programs, Tyler Manning, Jonathan Paytech, and Robert Dunn.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to approve resolution 2213 to extend DPW summer positions for Tyler Manning, Jonathan Paytech, and Robert Dunn. Discussion on the motion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bronick. Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Helbling. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washington.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have 3 ordinances. The first ordinance is to take from the table, ordinance number 1310. Do we have a motion to take from the table?
I'd like to make a motion to take from the table ordinance 1310, the dog park.
Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to take from the table ordinance 1310, establishing restrictions and regulations for off-leash areas for dogs in public parks and development. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance 1310?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 1310.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to adopt ordinance 1310, which shall establish restrictions and regulations for off-leash areas for dogs in public parks and development. Discussion on the motion. Mayor?
I had
sent a communication to council concerning this, and I want to bring it up again. I'm not questioning the rules of the dog park. I mean, they've been crafted the way they have been, and I don't have any big problem with those. Mr. Fode did bring up the issue of the children, and that's, you know, separate from what I'm talking about. My concern is, when you look at this at face value, it's an ordinance that states if anyone breaks any of the 10 rules, or whatever the rules are, that they can be cited and fined, which I understand. However, you're telling the Borough of Bellevue and you're telling the police department what you want done is, if someone comes up to the dog park with no bones in their pocket, a rubber ball in their hand, you want the police to cite them and fine them. It makes no sense. It's not crafted correctly as an ordinance for that. Now, if someone comes up there and there's a disruption, yes, the police are going to intervene and we to cite them for disorderly conduct or whatever else may be necessary or whatever tools in their pocket. But to sit there and, maybe it's just a matter of semantics, say we want rules 1 through 10 followed, and if you don't follow them, the police have the right to cite you. Now you have to, and you're sitting here and you're telling the citizens of Bellevue that if I can't prove my dog has been spayed, that I'm going to be cited, and I'm going to have to go in front of the magistrate, and the magistrate's going to have to make a decision whether or not my proof of spaying my dog is accurate. Or maybe that's just too easy. Maybe it's, you know, you had 15 milk bones, a rubber ball in your pocket, because those things are not allowed there. You can't bring dog treats, you can't bring toys for common sense reasons with that many dogs. But you're telling the police department that you want them cited for those reasons and taken in front of a magistrate for those reasons. And I can't imagine a magistrate sitting there going, dog treats, rubber ball, and something else. I mean, I don't think this was put together correctly. I think it should have been put together as a resolution adopting the dog park's rules and then let the police enforce what is necessary, because you're going to be paying a police officer to go to court, and you have a pretty good chance that the magistrate will look at this and go, really? Get out. You have to, and whether the police, if you pass this tonight, I can tell you, I will instruct the police, there's no way we're going to look at these rules and we're not going to cite people for these rules. We'll cite them for disorderly conduct, we'll cite them for whatever trespass, whatever is necessary, because I don't feel in good faith that the face value of this ordinance, we go in front of a magistrate, it's not going to get booted out, and we're not going to be wasting taxpayers' money. I think we should just very quickly turn it into a resolution, vote on it as soon as possible, get it in place, and let's go at it. The dog park's a wonderful accoutrement to our borough. They've crafted rules that seem reasonable to the council, that's fine. But, you know, in 10 years, we need to sit back and look at a piece of legislation and go, really? You know, it makes no sense. In addition to what I'm saying here also, I'm going to ask council one more time, I've asked 2 months ago, to please review the rules that are in place for Memorial Park so that we can meld them together in coordination with the dog park. Because they do need updated. And yes, at Bain Park, the rules were originally cited by ordinance. At that time, maybe it made sense. You weren't allowed to have a horse in Bain Park. Okay, well that was probably common sense because there was a lot of horses. That was something easy to enforce. I'm going to give as much oomph and credence to enforcing the rules of this dog park through law enforcement when necessary, so when we get to the magistrate, it is what it is. Just like we can enforce the rest of the, we don't enforce the rules per se because some of them are so antiquated that you have to cite people for other reasons, whether it be disorderly, whether it be trespassing, or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your comments. I do want to say the dog park rules are already in resolution form.
Yes.
And it was requested to put in an ordinance. And I will tell you that you cannot instruct the police officers to break the law. And if the police officers, hold on,
I'm not asking them to break the law.
they are. If they're not enforcing our laws, if they're they're not enforcing our laws, they are not doing their job, and police officers who are not doing their job could be terminated. And the council does terminate employees. We don't have direct supervision, but we do have the ability to hire and fire. So I don't really think it's a good idea for you to do that. Okay, Kathy, you already
I have one question for you, I think it's very important, I apologize. No,
We have at least two other people who want to speak. You have your turn. You can have your turn after them if you don't.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Kathy?
No, I was just wondering if we're going to consider what Tom said tonight.
Bring it up.
I'd like to hear from Connie or whoever came up with the rules, why children under 12 aren't permitted.
Connie, would you please address that?
Yes. This was done after regular research of dog parks across the country. I mean, you understand, Kathy, you're always talking about us doing something progressive, don't do things the same old ways. Well, in other parts of the state and other parts of this country, actually the age restrictions are even more severe. They will go clear up to 16 or 18. If you go to any dog behaviorist, they will tell you that having small children in an off-leash area is the most horrifyingly dangerous thing that they can think of you doing with a dog. People say, Mr. Fody said, my daughter loves dogs. I'm sure she does, but not every dog loves babies. Little children running around, to some dogs, look like prey. And even the dogs that aren't aggressive towards children, which is just be natural, are likely just in playing with each other, in running around and jumping and having fun. And these are very large dogs, a lot of them. You can have dogs up there, they're up to 200 pounds. If they knock over a small child, and that child hits her head on a rock, that child's going to be dead. And there's going to be a horrible tragedy. And what I have said, we've had a handful of people who don't like the fact that small children aren't allowed in the dog park. Most of the people who go to the dog park say, thank you for doing that. This park is for dogs. I don't take my dog to your playground. Please don't bring your children into my dog park, where just natural dog behavior can be a hazard. I don't think it's a lot to ask. It's safer for everybody, and I tell these people, I will not risk your child's life. I just won't do it.
Okay, thank you. One more? I thought you did. I thought you did. Okay, Jane?
Yeah, okay, the one that Tom Berry can handle us that the county has, it's, I don't know how when they go to the magistrate's office for this, but the owner must clean up after the dog. I mean, that's one of their ordinances, and the other one is talking about pet owners must fulfill rules. So obviously, the county thought to take it into an ordinance form, and it says the dog owner fails to comply with the one rules, they decided by the police and animal control officers. So, the children one, I agree 100% with Tom. We do not take walkers into the play area with the children up here. We really don't think we should bring the children to the dog park. If you've never been up there, I mean, you can have 20 big dogs run around, and it can be a little intimidating. So,
I just wanted the rationale.
Any other comments?
Can I make one other comment as far as enforcement goes? There is a provision in dealing with enforcement that says that removal, if you violate, you will be removed. The penalty section, I think the way that it's crafted would really only come into play if it's a serious offense or a multiple offense. I mean, really, I think the idea is adopted by boards, and this was my understanding at the time. It's already in a resolution. You want something that's more concrete by putting it in a resolution that gives it the ability to cite if you needed to. If it's in a resolution, it wouldn't have that ability. So that's why the enforcement provision in there really is removal from the park is really the proper remedy. You bring your dog in, you're leaving the toys around or whatever, it's a distraction. okay, the police, somebody can go in and say, hey, you're not following our rules that have been adopted, you need to deal with it. That's really the first level of enforcement. That's how it was intended.
So we can do that without this ordinance.
Well, you can do it through rules and regulations, but you wouldn't have the second level of enforcement through citation if necessary.
So in your, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but as an attorney, if I get cited for having milk bones and a rubber ball, I've been throwing that ball, I've been feeding all the dogs, and I don't advocate that dog park, it's unsafe. I'm with you on this. And I'm removed. Okay, and I come back tomorrow, I do it again, I'm removed, I come back and finally I'm cited. I'm not, and I can go, the magistrate up in Ross Township. I'm just having a hard time thinking, they're gonna take this real seriously. They may come back and say, you know what, we better start citing them for trespass, citing for something else. But really, to pay a police officer, and you can get this nitpicky, I think you have to think it might go far. Because in 10 years, when none of us are here, or most of us aren't here, you have to understand it can be interpreted, and people can manipulate and use things for their own benefit. We see it every day in our society with our laws. That's why I'm saying, err on being conservative. And I understand what you're saying. Okay, if it's an ordinance, the police will enforce it. Well, even though it's a badly crafted ordinance, in my opinion, and it's going to cost taxpayers money to go to the magistrate, and it's probably going to get thrown out time after time after time. Okay, we'll make the police enforce it then. That's just plain silly. Also, we have the rules adopted. Get rid of the ordinance and just let it go. Let the police enforce it. And as a side note, I have to agree with the age restriction. When you get a number of dogs together, the pack mentality, and even just in play, they become inflamed sometimes. I would be very hesitant to have a young child there. I sit with my own 3 dogs. When I have guests to my house with my 3 dogs, I'm very cautious.
Okay, I will add that right now, our rules for Bang Park and Memorial Park are in ordinance form. Ross Township has Memorial Park in ordinance form. So I would think that ordinance form is the proper way because I have 3 examples of them being in ordinance form. Jane, you had your hand up.
With the resolution, it's not enforced. It's just a resolution saying that's our rules. Nobody can decide that anything at all with a resolution.
I'm sorry.
A resolution is not law. Nobody can do anything with a resolution. We can tell you to move, your dog can eat another dog, or say, get out of here. So,
You remember something else.
Huh?
There are other laws that you have that are already in place. We go to Bain Park. Those rules haven't been updated since that park, in the rules of 1912.
Yeah, I know you keep asking.
What we're saying, and yes, it was adopted by resolution. And just like the rules of Memorial Park were adopted by, by ordinance. But we don't, no one in this room can tell me to enforce the laws as ordinance states in Memorial Park. You're not allowed to have a motorcycle up there.
But what we
And hear me out, see, if it doesn't make sense, you have to fix it. That's why I'm asking. Just, the rules were adopted, leave it go. And if there's a problem up there, call the police, let the police deal with the people under the laws that are already on the books. Much like they do at Bain Park. When kids are down there, we get them under trespass, then we throw them out of the park, they're not allowed back in. We can do that. But to sit there and go, well, $50 fine for this, they're rules, they're not laws. Use the rules to keep an orderly fashion. And then when someone's not following the rules, then bring the police in and let them deal with it the way they have to. Removal, trespass, whatever it takes. Because
we do enforce the laws up at Bain Park. I was there when someone had an open bottle of alcohol. The police came up and they asked him to dump it. Now, of course, and I see this in code too. We go up, our employees, police, code enforcement, we give people people a warning, we ask them to do something. We're not necessarily saying, okay, now this ordinance states a $100 fine. That's not something that we do. But in that instance, they came up, they asked him to dump the wine. So we do enforce the rules up in Bain Park.
Were they enforcing the rules of Bain Park, or were they enforcing the rules of Pennsylvania container laws?
I do not.
Well,
But that is one of the rules at Bain Park. So do we really want to say, oh gee, it was state or was it borough? So, but they do enforce it because I was up there at that one opportunity. I went, what the heck is going on? We have all these police officers here. And then I found out.
There are certain laws that have to be enforced. It could be another container law versus not allowed to have alcohol in the thing. It's redundancy. That's why I asked 2 months ago, let's get the rules revised for Memorial Park so they marry with the dog park. Because one of the rules of the park is you're not allowed to have a motorcycle. There have to be lines painted for all your parking. But we don't have that. You would make them do it. Well, how can you make them do it when the borough won't do it? I mean, it only takes 30 minutes to revise these rules, guys. There's only 10 of them. I mean, I don't mean the dog park, I mean the rules for the Memorial Park. They're antiquated. They were done in 1955 or 58. Quit tying everything down so tight. We don't need an ordinance for these rules. We just don't.
Any other questions or comments? Mark, you're done?
I'm just torn. Anyway, I have no comment.
Okay. So a motion has been made and seconded to establish, motion has been made and seconded. I'm sorry, comments, we did that, no other comments. All those in favor say aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brun. Mr. Camello. Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Hellman. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washner. Mr. Solicitor, a question about the vote for Mrs. Coder. What was the count? The count right now is 5 to 2. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Okay, our second ordinance, we have a motion on the vacant and commercial structures.
I'd like to make a motion to take from the table ordinance 1311.
Is there a second? Second. A motion has been made and seconded to take from the table for the final reading of adoption ordinance 1311, which establishes regulations for vacant industrial and commercial structures. Okay, the next motion to adopt it.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 1311.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to adopt ordinance number 1311, which establishes regulations for vacant industrial and commercial structures. Comments or discussion on the motion?
Can I make 2 quick points real quick in my latest review of the ordinance on Article 1, there's a typographical error. It should say that this is applicable to commercial/industrial buildings, so that change has been made. And in the definition section, there should be a definition, the last where it says vacant, it should say vacant storefront. So that also would be reflected in that. Those are 2 just typographical errors, so those will be added in. On some vacant building. Pardon me. Oh, sorry. In the definition section, right? This one should be vacant storefront.
Would you mind if I spoke first and I had asked for a change to that? No one has a problem with that. I have asked for a change, upon looking at it. Could you read what we're talking about?
In Article 3.2, dealing with waiver of fees, there would be certain conditions there, and the last one, there would be added in, or Section E, which would state other good cause as determined by a majority vote of council. This would give council the ability, under certain special circumstances, if someone had an issue, they could come and explain to council. If a majority agreed and said, you know what, that's a special circumstance, you don't need to comply with that waiver, or that fee schedule, then you could grant a waiver. So it gives a little bit of flexibility, might help take some of that, the questions on the subjective or objective nature of the ordinance and help that, because it gives every person an opportunity to come here and explain to council their specific issue and why they feel that shouldn't apply to them.
And I brought that up because let's say you have somebody who's renovating their storefront And I mean, and they are making this effort to renovate it, I certainly don't want to see them charged while they're making this effort to improve their property. That was one of the reasons that I thought that would be it. Any other discussions on it, Mark?
You know, I asked a lot of questions already, and the answer, so I'm just saying that I'm going to vote yes, and knowing that the mission is good, and expect that if there's problems, we'll come back here and amend it. If there's some sort of problems.
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do we need reimbursements from that, section?
Okay, would we amend? Well, first, let's see if anybody has any other comments.
Just one thing, I was out during the discussion. Does our code enforcement officer, has he been consulted on this? Because it was brought to my attention, he said that he didn't even have an opportunity to give feedback on this. And I don't know where we are with the rental inspections, and we are going to report on that. But I just don't know who's going to be checking on Craigslist and in newspapers. Is that part of his job? Well, is he giving us a report on that, or I just don't know how ordinances that we got to enforce. That's mine. I like but he was telling me it's under the universal maintenance already.
Some of those aspects about the cleanliness of property would be governed by the property maintenance code already.
So it almost goes back to the dog park situation. Do we really need this, or do we need to enforce the ones we already have?
Jim Delcoy was at the public safety meeting whenever this was discussed. So he had the opportunity to have input as any other person on that committee. So, I mean, I don't understand why he would say he was not consulted whenever he's part of the committee, you're part of the committee. That's what you're there for, is to give input onto this particular ordinance. And it was there, how many weeks? It was in committee, Jane?
Yeah, actually, we gave it to Delcoy to go over because there was a question about 60 days, there was supposed to be 60 business days, and we thought, well, that's going to be forever before anybody has to do anything. So he had some marks in here that they had.
I was in the committee for 3 months.
Yeah.
They actually said it was good, to be approved.
Well, he came up and talked to me last week, and that's not.
Maybe we should talk to public safety. That's what it was for 3 months, and we asked this opinion.
But I just don't want it to be like the burning ordinance where we have it on the books, and how many people have been cited for using their grill on their deck?
Not the purpose of the ordinance is to cite people, it's to keep people safe. We didn't pass it so we don't cite people.
Yeah, but if we don't enforce them, that's my problem with ordinances. If you're not going to enforce them, then why spend the money to do them? And the spirit of it, like Mr. Bodie said, I think the spirit of it is good, that they maintain the property and it's good and they're trying to rent it. But I just don't know if it's ready to get adopted yet. So I guess one way we can do it is, like Mark said, just adopt it as it is and then maybe. But again, that's costing us money every time we amend ordinances.
This one's already ready on.
Oh,
Money's
so
already.
you're not going to charge us anything?
No, this one's already on. For this one, to adopt this one is not going to cost you more money. Obviously, if it goes back and gets amended and you have advertising,
Right.
that's what you'll do.
But I think we should do that on any ordinance. I mean, you try it out, see how it works, and, I mean, you know, improve upon it or adjust it. I mean, I think you need to be flexible on ordinances, so. Mark?
I agree with what you're saying, but I also see the good side, I said that, so, and you see the good side as well, but I think when it comes to who's supposed to prove that they're on Craigslist, that would be the landlord, you know, just present something to show they're on land. And I think that, you know, having talked to other businesses, I think they're, majority are in favor of that because they see the ones that are getting away with doing nothing or letting it look very bad. So the bright side is, I don't know if it would be that much work for Jim. I mean, if somebody calls one in and says, hey, please look at this, versus him going out and searching for them, then he has that, you know, trigger now to go do that and make it, you know, a claim with them and get it started. So it might be easier than you might have thought.
And most of our businesses, I mean, they're very nice and very well kept, and so this is just a handful that's hurting it for the rest. I mean, that's my opinion. Any other discussion? James?
With these ordinances that have been coming through the committees, we've been really being proactive. Somebody comes with a situation and says, this is a situation that we have, and we would like you to look into it. Sometimes we look into it, sometimes we say, well, that's not going to work at all. There's a lot of things going on. And as for laws on the books there's a lot of laws on the books that I would really like to see go away. I don't like cutting my grass all the time, but you know what? I don't cut my grass. Somebody's coming down, and I'm getting excited, and I'm going to the magistrate, and my yard's fenced in, and nobody can see it but me. It ain't bothering nobody else in this room, but I will get a fine for it.
Okay, and then just review the 3 changes.
Yes, on the first page, Article 1 should read commercial instead of commonwealth. In the definition section, right above window, you'll see the definition of vacant. That should just be vacant storefront. And the third proposed change would be to 3.2, dealing with waivers.
Is that something that's okay with everybody?
Yeah, that one really, the other two are just typographical, not a big deal. The third one, it's not substantive, but it's still, you would need to amend the motion in order to reflect the third change, which would be adding in or subsection E, other good cause as determined by a majority vote of council. That's sort of the catch-all. You know, you would have the ability to have a resident come here, explain their individual situation, and if a majority of council supports their reasoning, then they would be granted a waiver.
Is that something that's acceptable for everybody to add in to help out someone that maybe is doing some changes or renovations? Does anybody have a problem with that? No? Okay. So how would we do that? We would amend?
Yes, there a motion. Who made the original motion?
Jane.
Makes a motion to that.
I'd like to make a motion to amend and to add section E on Article 3. David will dismiss for a second.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I'll make the appropriation.
Okay. Okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brother. Mr. Cabela. Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Hellman. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washburn. Motion carries.
And thank you for considering that addition, I appreciate that. Okay, the third ordinance, do we have a motion to take from the table?
I'd like to take from the table third ordinance 1312, it's the dumpster screening.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to take from the table for the final reading of adoption ordinance 1312, which adopts restrictions for screening of dumpsters. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance 1312?
Make a motion to adopt ordinance 1312.
We have a second.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to adopt ordinance 1312, which adopts regulations for screening of dumpsters. Discussion on the motion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nays? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brother. Mr. Cabela. Mrs. Coder. Ms. Heffley. Mr. Hellman. Mrs. Viscusi. Mr. Viscusi. Mrs. Washburn. Motion carries.
Okay. Is there any old business? Kathy?
I just had a question, since we've been passing a lot of ordinances, and people say there are a lot of ordinances on the floor in the city. Where are we on the codification? Because I would like to see all the ordinances. I've never seen them. I know the public hasn't seen them. They should be on our website. We've been working on this for 4 years, I think. Where do we stand on that? Does anybody even know?
I don't. They are actually, all the ordinances are in my office, and I do have one last time trying to organize. There's a lot of ordinances there. I don't know exactly where that process is. I don't think there's something they're spending every single day on doing it, but we are trying to organize those ordinances into a codification. And, I can give you an update, a better update next month maybe, and I can give you an outline of where we are. It shouldn't be something that takes years like that.
We paid a company to do
Yeah.
it, right? Are we working with that
I
company?
don't know.
So where is, we paid $15,000 or $20,000.
This was I remember May, because I talked to Doug about this, so Doug had to be here, so that would have been May of 2012. And there was a list of questions that this company had. And,
Okay, maybe that's where, I remember Doug giving us all the orders.
okay, and so
telling us
we had to
wording
respond.
with the, yeah. And so that's what I said, one of the attorneys in my office has that. So that's, I said, I can report back to you next month and see what the status is. But that's where it was. It originally came to my office through Doug.
If I again may interject, General Code did contact me approximately 10 days ago, asking the same questions, where we are, because they're ready to wrap it up. I will commit to calling them next week and getting an update, at least from their standpoint, and we will pull all this together and get things completed. I was unaware of any of the items that had happened in April, May, obviously, but it sounds like there's a whole bunch of things. I think we'll pull them together pretty well.
A while back, we did get a big book, and it was sort of bound together. It may have been before you, and we have a big book, and so there's a whole bunch of things in there.
It's supposed to be on the disc, right?
Oh, I know. It is supposed to be
It
good.
should be on the
Should be on
website.
any media that's available, this, whatever. I will tell you that any ordinances that have been passed, at least in recent history, are on file. Kathy, the receptionist, can get them. We have notebooks in the old system where they are here, as passed with the dates on it. But are they in the general code, in the manual we're supposed to use? I do not believe they are. I believe we're close. I'll find that out myself in the next meeting.
Mayor?
How often is something like this recommended to be done? Updated public.
I don't have an answer for that, but the fact of the matter is, once everything is caught up and we have our base, it's not very costly to, on a semi-annual or annual basis, push the documentation to general code and get our manual updated. And that's something I'll be looking into moving forward in the budget. But the big task is, when you've had years and years that it hasn't been done, trying to gather all that, especially with a third party doing it. While it's wonderful because they take the workload, the questions that are coming are questions of detail on the ordinances. What does this mean? Because they try to categorize everything and make it almost like a library. And that makes it all easier for us to use. So that's where I'm jumping in on the middle, hope to get a little more information for you. They have contacted me. Actually, at a seminar where they're doing it all online. You will be able to search dumpsters and find out online what ordinance have more dumpster. I mean, the technology's done amazing things to this application where we are going. We'll do a full report the next week.
Okay, any other old business? Lynn?
Do we need to make that motion to approve the letter of intent for the governor's sign?
I know. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Okay, any other old business? No other old business? New business. Our DAS has some new business to talk about. You have some new business to talk about, Tree Revitalize?
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah. It's on the agenda.
we are in the process of submitting a grant application for the Tree Vitalize program. Part of that is to have an ordinance passed, which I have given the suggested ordinance to our solicitor tonight. I'm trying to talk the Tree Vitalize people into allowing us to catch up on that one because our ordinance process is a several-month process. I would like to have the council's approval to resubmit the application from last year, which was basically to put trees in the stone parking lot near the Bellevue Park area. That was the application. My only question is where to. We've got a separate committee. There was a committee identified in last year's application. The only thing I would do would be change dates and change DAS contact to my contact information. Look it over. It's a pretty good application. I can give you copies if you want. That would make the burden a lot easier if it is still a desire to put the trees in the stone parking lot area in Bellevue Park.
Whenever I talked to Jeff Bergman from the Pennsylvania Conservancy, he thought 10 trees would be good to start with, and there was not, what you're referring to, those trees were on the side of McElrath and the Cinder Lot. These would be in another area, and so I don't know exactly where.
If we could verbalize that to me, I would
Yeah.
appreciate that. Then I can, the application is on our database, so all I have to do is go in and make the changes, so I
But
appreciate
Jeff
it.
thought that 10. And another thing that I was told whenever I talked to him, that as long as the ordinances were in process,
Okay.
that was acceptable to them. But if I were you, I would confirm with him before we submit it so that we don't have a problem with it. He said as long as they're in process, that would be an acceptable thing.
Did speak with him today, we didn't drill down that far, he kind of just read what the rates are. You've had that discussion, I'll call him again, he's very,
Yeah, just to confirm, oh yeah, he was very good, very good to talk to, and, you know, I felt that they want to accept.
Yes.
So,
Could someone verbalize to me where, could you would, someone send me an email with the verbalization of where the locations are? Maybe because I'm familiar.
Okay, we'll talk.
I appreciate it.
Or the Dogwoods too, you can talk to President of Dogwoods, or someone, Jane.
Yeah, I don't remember that complete, resolution we sent last year, but, it's the copy that we have.
Sure. I mean, I just submitted that, I can get a copy of it, I'll ask them.
Yeah, and the fact that we have to have an ordinance.
It is an ordinance that they're requesting, yes. It's by request of the tree vitalized people. What I had an opportunity to do is I looked at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, looked at a couple of neighboring communities, and frankly, found one that's kind of non-invasive, yet gets the job done, and I've passed it on our solicitor today. If he has committed to me if we can get a good copy of his wisdom back to me in time for the application.
And when's that application?
The 20th of September, in 10 days.
So we have to approve this tonight?
No,
No.
we do not.
When are you going to approve it?
According to Linda, if we have it in process, we will have a good draft to him, and I can submit the application and say, this is, generally speaking, the spirit of the ordinance that we wish to pass. I will pass it by any interest. I'll send it to everyone in emails, but in the mailbox as soon as I get it, so we have a chance to review. I literally just put the finishing touches on it this morning, or would like to earlier.
That's what he told me. So, because I'm hoping, because otherwise I'm gonna have to wait.
Either way, I see it.
Okay, any questions for Ron concerning the tree vitalized?
Don't we also like to have a shade tree commission?
Yes, there are three people identified, again, I'll pass it. There are three people identified as a commission that need to be submitted. Two of them need to actually be certified as a term for basically a certified tree care. There were two individuals certified that were on that application, I'll get those names to you. The third was obviously the previous DES, I would replace that with myself, neither of us were certified. Not required, I'm required to have one certification for every 10 trees planted. So by rule, we only need one certified if we're going to plant 10 trees. We had two, we go up to 20 if they have. That's right.
One of them was my next door neighbor, and then I know there's someone else, and I think there was someone else who wanted to get certified as well.
Actually, I think my predecessor was attempting to get into the class and it was full.
Right, so that's why then I asked around with my neighbor, and there was someone else.
I've got names.
Okay, so but there may be some other people who would want to be certified. I know there was one other person that was interested, so. Okay.
But what's needed for the application is three. So as long as we've got three people identified, we could make the committee as large as we want.
Okay.
The requirement is three with one certified for every 10 trees.
For the Shade Tree Commission, they have to be certified to be on the Shade Tree Commission. Okay.
Well, again, to be on the commission, one certification for every 10 trees planted.
Okay.
I don't know how they quantify that, but if we want 10 trees, we only need one. The list I have gives us 2 certified people, which means if they're generous and there are trees available, we have the capacity to accept them.
Because I don't know about other people, but we do have some people that are very astute at trees, and I would like to see our tree ordinance to be advisory. You know, so if someone has a question concerning a tree, you know, they can say, okay, these are what we recommend, or they can help put together a list of what is recommended. I don't want to see, okay, you have to get permits, you have to get approval. I mean, that will not go to my house, I know, so, you know, I would like to see it as advisory and recommendations.
The community that I based is followed the state ordinance fairly closely, and it has had success with Tree Vitalize with this ordinance. All of that's in there. And frankly, I think it's non-invasive and it allows us some freedoms if the solicitor could put a little more of that in. But I like to look at it.
Okay, any other questions or comments concerning that? Do we have a motion to approve the application?
So moved.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the, for the DAS to apply for the Tree Vitalize program. Discussion on the motion? Okay, no discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Nays? No, I don't think so. Okay, motion passes. Okay, public contribution. Are there any residents who wish to speak? If they can step up to the podium, state your name and address. State your name and address, and if you can write it on the register, and you will have 2 minutes.
103 Washington Avenue. Screening of the dumpsters. I don't know if much thought has gone into this, but you're going to need more space than that dumpster actually sits on because of the arc of lifting it. I've already talked to my haulers about it. Okay, plus you're going to need more width in order to get the arms in, depending on whether it's a front loader truck or a back loader truck. You say you want a pad there with a 6-foot fence around it. When you lift something up, it arcs.
Yeah.
Now you have a wall, so you're going to have more space this way, and need more space that way. There's a lot of places around you don't have the space. I want to know if there can be variation on this. There's some places, my particular building, it's a dead-end street. You have to look straight down the driveway. So someone would have to go down there and turn around down the driveway to see that particular dumpster. Okay?
Is it a building on Washington Avenue?
No, that's my home.
Okay.
I've had this apartment building go since 1980. Okay? I've seen trash in residential houses piled up in lighting cans and not with lids on. My dumpsters have lids on. It's a 1-yard dumpster in the back. You're talking anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to put that enclosure in. I wondered if this was anything thought out. It's a nice gesture to make everything nice and pretty, but it's something to think about. You passed the motion, but I don't know whether you really gave it much thought of the logistics of the whole thing. So,
Good points. Where's your building at?
220 Spring Avenue, it's a dead-end street. It's the last building on the right. So there's a row of trees on one side looking across the big yard, then the building, and then the dumpster in the back of the driveway, so the driver can back straight down or drive straight down, yank it up, dump it, and pull out. Now you're going to have a closure built around all these dumpsters, plus an automatic gate on them. Now the man has to get out, fuss with the gate in the snow, drag him on the ground, and it's a snow plug out, put the snow in front. Now the garbage doesn't get empty because no one's got over there to dig it out. If he came one night and the dumpster guy came the next day, okay? I just wondered if this would be thought out very well. Plus, it'll take extra time for him to do that job, and so that's going to up the rate on my trash hauling.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of variables in this.
Okay,
Plus, stuff in the alleys, and like just in the businesses in Bellevue, there's 2 or 3 of them. Now, you're going to have one great big enclosure for 3 different dumpsters in the back of these buildings up there, or is each business going to have to build their own? You're the council, you figure it out.
Thank you.
I mean, just to pass an ordinance, I think it's ridiculous. As long as the dumpster's kept clean, painted, the lids are put on it. The other thing, your question is, there's an ordinance in Bellevue, I had the book, and that's how my leases are written up. You have to take your laundry down, you can't hang out your laundry. It has to be put up at a certain time and taken down at another time. That's one of the ordinances that should be eliminated. Personally, I think for every new law that's put on the books, 100 should be taken off because they're inappropriate.
I don't think we have that many.
Well, I'm talking state, county, federal government, too many ones.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. At the end of the meeting, will you give us your contact information so that we can, we want to make sure that we are addressing your concern, and so if you could give us the contact information.
I've already called, and I was told I'd have an ordinance sent out to me on this, and it never came.
If you give us your contact information, we will get you a copy of the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Sure. Any other visitors who wish to speak?
Grant Sale, 146 North South. Just curious where we're at in getting minutes and agendas posted online. There has not been minutes posted on the Bellevue website since January, and there has not been an agenda since April. And I don't know what's on the agenda until I walk into the work at 1.
Okay, I apologize. However, we were without a borough manager for 6 months, so our administrative office was a little strained. So that is something that is in the process, but I mean, there are a lot of other things going on, so hopefully very soon we will have that on the site. And I do apologize, it was because of, having fewer people in our administrative office. I mean, it's been.
Well, I mean, the dog pool party is on the events page. There's a lot of other things that are on there, but I just find that the agendas and the minutes never seem to make it to the website.
Granted, it is in process, I promise.
So when do we expect that the agendas will be posted?
I can begin. The agenda actually shouldn't be that difficult. I've trained another staff person on updating the website so we can begin to have the agendas caught at the next meeting. I was hoping.
I just think it's fair to the public.
Minutes, perhaps another story because we have a few to catch up on. You were saying not since January?
January was the last minutes.
January 2000. Getting at least those that are created up there. My apologies, I didn't realize it was back that far. I know there's a couple of meetings that was new guy's fault.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there exists currently, but I just think it's fair to the public to be able to know what's being discussed in a meeting prior to walking into the work thing.
I agree,
Okay.
I agree.
Thanks.
Definitely, thank you. Any other visitors who wish to speak? Okay, no visitors who wish to speak. We are, at this time, we are going into an executive session for personnel issues, and I don't know, will we be taking any kind of action?
Don't believe we will.
Okay. Will we be taking action? I don't believe that we'll be taking any action, so hopefully it won't be very long. Okay, then we'll come back out and adjourn. You have a choice of staying or do we have a motion to adjourn? So the regular. Oh, no, hold on. Should I say?
You should say.
Okay, we're finished with our executive session, and we are not taking action at this point in time. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn? So to adjourn. Okay, second?
Second.
This meeting is adjourned.